I never told my son how much I actually earned. $40,000 every single month. To him, I was just a simple woman living a quiet, ordinary life. He never knew what went on behind those office doors, the decisions I made, the weight I carried. One evening, he called and invited me to dinner. His wife's parents were visiting from abroad, and he wanted us all to meet. I agreed, but deep down I felt something strange. A quiet curiosity. I wanted to know how they would treat someone who seemed poor, someone beneath them. So, I decided to play the part. When I walked through the doors of that restaurant, everything shifted. The energy in the air changed. What happened that night would shatter my daughter-in-law's family in ways they never expected. And believe me, they earned every bit of it. But before I tell you what happened, you need to understand who I am, who I've always been. My son, Marcus, 35 years old, never really knew the truth about his mother. To him, I was just the woman who left home early for work, came back late and tired, cooked whatever was in the fridge, and smiled through it all. Maybe a secretary, maybe an average employee. Nothing special, I never corrected him. He didn't know that for almost 2 decades. I'd been a senior executive at a multinational corporation, earning $40,000 a month. He didn't know that I'd signed million-dollar contracts, led teams across continents, and made decisions that shaped entire companies. But I never told him, because money to me was never something to show off. I grew up in a time when dignity was worn quietly, when silence held more value than loud words. So, I kept my truth guarded. I lived in the same small apartment for years, carried the same old leather handbag until it faded, bought clothes from discount stores, and cooked my own meals. I saved, I invested. I built my wealth quietly, because true power doesn't scream. True power watches, and I was watching closely the day Marcus called. "Mom," he said, his voice softer than usual, nervous even, the kind of tone he had when he was a boy who'd done something wrong. "I need a favor. Simone's parents are here from overseas. We're having dinner Saturday night. They'd like to meet you." Something in his voice unsettled me. It wasn't excitement, it was hesitation, almost fear. The voice of someone afraid to be embarrassed, I asked, "Do they know anything about me?" There was a pause. Then he said, stumbling a bit, "I told them you work in an office, that you live alone, that you're simple, that you don't have much." That word, simple. As if everything I had ever done, everything I had built, could be reduced to that one word. I took a deep breath. "All right, Marcus. I'll be there." After we hung up, I looked around my living room. Old but clean furniture, bare walls, a small TV. Nothing impressive. And in that quiet moment, I made my decision. If my son thought I was poor, if his wife's parents were ready to judge me, then I would give them exactly what they expected to see. A poor, naive, broken mother. I wanted to see how they would treat someone they believed had nothing. I wanted to see their true faces. Because deep down, I already suspected what kind of people they were. The kind who measured worth in dollars. Not decency, and my instincts are never wrong. Saturday came. I put on the worst outfit I owned. A shapeless gray dress. Wrinkled and dull, the kind you find in a thrift shop. Worn-out shoes. No jewelry. Not even a watch. I tied my hair in a messy ponytail, grabbed an old canvas bag, and looked in the mirror. I looked like a woman life had forgotten. Invisible. Perfect. I got into a taxi and gave the driver the address. A restaurant in the most expensive part of the city. The kind of place where menus don't show prices. Where each glass costs more than an average person's paycheck. As the car moved through the city lights, I felt a strange mix of anticipation and sadness. Anticipation, because I knew something big was about to happen. Sadness, because part of me still hoped I was wrong. I wanted to believe they would be kind. That they would see past the old dress, but another part of me, the part that's lived long enough to know better, whispered that they wouldn't. The part of me that had survived 40 years, among corporate sharks, knew exactly what was waiting on the other side of that door. But the mother in me, the one who'd raised a boy with hand-me-downs and Sunday prayers, still hoped I was wrong. The taxi stopped in front of the restaurant. Warm amber light spilled onto the pavement. A doorman in white gloves opened the glass doors for elegant people who looked like they belonged there. I didn't. I paid the fare, smoothed the wrinkles from my dress, and stepped out. Each breath felt heavier than the last. Inside, everything shimmered. Crystal chandeliers, velvet chairs, the low hum of quiet conversations. And then, I saw them. Marcus stood near a long table by the window. Dark suit, white shirt, polished shoes. He looked handsome, but anxious, as if he'd been waiting for a disaster he couldn't prevent. Beside him, Simone, my daughter-in-law, impeccable as always. Cream dress with gold details, hair sleek, makeup perfect. But she wasn't looking at me. She was watching the door, with that tight, embarrassed smile of someone who's hoping you don't show up. And there they were, Simone's parents. Already seated like royalty on their thrones. Veronica, her mother, sparkled in a green sequined dress, jewels glittering at her throat and wrists. Her hair was pulled into an elegant bun, every strand disciplined. A cold kind of beauty, the kind that warns you not to speak unless spoken to. Beside her sat Franklin, gray suit, expensive watch, a serious face carved by years of comfort. They looked like they'd stepped out of a luxury ad, and I looked like the before picture. I walked toward them, slow, careful steps. Marcus saw me first. His eyes widened, just slightly. "Mom, you came," he said, his voice unsure. "Of course, son," I smiled, soft and nervous. "Here I am." Simone leaned in for a quick kiss on my cheek, cold, formal. "Mother-in-law, so nice to see you," she said. But her eyes whispered something else. She turned to her parents. "Mom, Dad, this is Marcus's mother." Veronica looked up, studied me, and in that instant, I saw everything. The judgment, the calculation, the quiet disappointment. Her gaze moved slowly. My faded dress, my old shoes, my worn canvas tote. She didn't speak right away, just extended a manicured hand. "A pleasure," she said, voice cool, handshake colder. Franklin followed, polite smile, lifeless eyes. I sat at the far end of the table, the seat no one wanted. No one helped me pull out my chair. No one asked if I was comfortable. The waiter arrived, setting down heavy menus written entirely in French. I opened mine, pretending to read. Veronica watched me with that smirk people use when they think they've caught you bluffing. "Do you need help with the menu?" she asked, smiling without warmth. "Yes, please," I said softly. "I don't know what any of these mean," she sighed, turning to the waiter. "Something simple for her. Something that doesn't cost too much. We don't want to overdo it." The words hung in the air like smoke. Marcus looked away. Simone folded her napkin, eyes on the table. And I just smiled, small and quiet. Veronica started the conversation about her trip from abroad, the jet lag, how exhausting first-class flights could be. Then she eased into her favorite topic, money. She mentioned their hotel, just $1,000 a night. Their car, something elegant. Of course, and their shopping, nothing major. Just a few thousand in gifts, she spoke, waiting for me to react. Waiting for awe. I just nodded. "How nice," I said. "That sounds lovely." She smiled again, that patronizing kind of smile that hides poison. "You know, Ara, we've always been careful with money," she said. "Franklin's businesses have done well. I handle our investments. We've been fortunate. And you, what do you do?" Her tone was sweet but sharp enough to cut. "I work in an office," I replied, lowering my eyes. "Paperwork, filing, simple things." Veronica exchanged a look with her husband. "Ah, administrative work," she said. "That's fine. Honest work. All jobs are dignified, right?" "Of course," I said softly. The food arrived, plates that looked like art, each one smaller than my palm. Veronica cut her steak with perfect posture, and I sat there, smiling, invisible. Veronica leaned back in her chair, dabbing the corner of her mouth with a linen napkin. The waiter had just cleared the plates, and for a second, there was only the soft hum of background music, a piano melody too elegant for the tension sitting at that table. "You know, Ara," she began, swirling what was left of her wine. "I think it's important we talk about something as a family now." Marcus stiffened. Simone's fork froze midair. I just folded my hands in my lap and waited. "I've been meaning to discuss Marcus and Simone's future," Veronica said, her tone calm but deliberate, the kind of voice used in business meetings, not family dinners. "They're doing well, of course, but we think it's time they consider a few things: investments, lifestyle, long-term goals." Her words weren't meant for me. They were meant for the air, for the audience she believed I wasn't part of. She smiled faintly. "You see, Franklin and I always planned ahead. We've ensured Simone will never have to worry. And Marcus, well, now that he's part of our family, we want the same for him." She took a small sip of wine before continuing. "But financial stability requires discipline, the right choices, the right company." Her eyes flicked toward me when she said it, just for a second, but enough. I saw it. Everyone did. Marcus cleared his throat. "Mom, maybe this isn't—" Veronica raised a manicured hand, cutting him off. "Please, Marcus, let me finish." Franklin leaned in slightly, his deep voice joining hers like a verdict. "We're not judging anyone," he said. "We just think it's time Marcus focuses on the future, surrounding himself with people who can help him grow professionally, socially." "You understand, don't you, Ara?" I smiled gently. "Of course," I said. "Every parent wants the best for their children." Veronica nodded, pleased with my answer. "Exactly. That's all we want. The best." Her tone softened, almost pitying. "You've done what you could, I'm sure, but life? It's not easy when you don't have the same opportunities, the same connections. That's why family like ours, well, we take care of our own." The air around us grew heavier. Even the waiter seemed to walk slower when passing our table, as if not to disturb the performance. Simone stared at her plate. Marcus's jaw tightened. And I? I just sat there, smiling, quiet, invisible. The poor mother they thought they'd already understood. Veronica pushed her plate slightly aside and clasped her hands together, her rings flashing under the chandelier light. "I just hope, Ara," she said sweetly, "that you understand what an adjustment this is for Marcus. He's stepping into a different world now. A world of responsibility, of class, of refinement." She let the last word linger like perfume. I nodded. "You're right. It's a different world." She smiled, satisfied, mistaking my calm for ignorance. And that's when it hit me. She didn't see me. Not really. She saw the story she wanted to believe. A small woman in a small life who had somehow stumbled into hers. But what she didn't know was that I had built empires while people like her were still learning to pronounce strategy. That I'd retired early, not because I was tired, but because I'd already won. And that tonight, I was playing a role, so I lowered my eyes, pretending to study the delicate swirl of chocolate on my plate. I let her keep talking. Because the thing about people like Veronica is, they always talk too much. They show their cards, their pride, their insecurity, all wrapped up in gold and arrogance. When the waiter brought the bill, Veronica reached for it without hesitation. "Please," she said. "Allow us." "We insist." Franklin nodded, proud, as if generosity were a trophy. Marcus looked down. Simone let out a quiet sigh, and I smiled again. "Thank you," I said softly. "That's very kind of you." I stood slowly, gathered my tote bag, and placed a small envelope on the table. "For the waiter," I said simply. "A little something," Veronica frowned, confused. The waiter opened it later. I saw his eyes widen, just slightly, before he looked back at me in disbelief. He didn't say a word, but the way he straightened his posture told me everything. Veronica noticed too. For the first time all evening, her smile faltered. Like, "Did it buy you respect?" The table went silent. Forks paused midair. The soft murmur of other diners faded to a dull echo in the distance. Veronica blinked. Her perfect smile twitched for the first time all evening. I'm not sure what you mean, she said lightly, a nervous laugh under her breath. I leaned forward, my tone still calm, still polite, but sharpened just enough to cut through her pretense. I mean, you've spent all that money, given all that support. Surely that must have earned you something. Loyalty, gratitude, maybe even control. Veronica straightened in her seat. Ara, that's not... Because if we're putting prices on love and dignity, I continued softly, then I'd just like to understand the rate. Franklin shifted uncomfortably. Marcus was staring at me now, eyes wide, realizing something had changed in my voice. Simone's spoon clinked against her glass as her hands trembled. I smiled, not the small, timid one I'd worn all evening. No, this one was deliberate, unapologetic. Tell me. Veronica, I said, my words slow, deliberate. Would $40,000 buy your silence? Would $15,000 buy your dignity? Her expression hardened. Excuse me. Because that's what you just offered me, I replied, keeping my tone even. $700 a month to stop being a mother. To erase myself. To make your life neater. Veronica's voice rose an octave. That's not what we meant. You're twisting my words, I shook my head. No, I heard you perfectly. You want to buy peace. But what you don't realize is, I paused. You're trying to negotiate with someone who's been closing million-dollar deals since you were still learning to pronounce portfolio. The color drained from her face. Franklin froze mid-breath. I leaned back in my chair and folded my napkin neatly. You see, Veronica, I've spent 20 years as a senior executive at one of the top firms in the country. My limited salary, as you so graciously put it, has been $40,000 a month. For nearly 2 decades, Simone gasped. Marcus's eyes flickered between disbelief and shame. Veronica tried to laugh, but it came out strangled. That's impossible. Marcus never mentioned. Of course he didn't, I interrupted, my voice still calm. Because he didn't know. I never told him. I never told anyone. Not because I had to hide it, but because I don't measure worth by how loudly someone spends. I turned slightly toward Marcus. You see, son, some people wear their success on their sleeves. Others carry it quietly, in how they treat people. Marcus swallowed hard, his eyes glistening. I looked back at Veronica, who now looked small, smaller than I'd ever seen her, stripped of her polish. That's why I came tonight dressed like this. I wanted to see how your family treats someone you think is beneath you. And you didn't disappoint. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. $700 a month. I repeated softly. That's what my silence is worth to you. But tell me, Veronica, what's your integrity worth? No one spoke. The entire table sat frozen, the air thick enough to choke on. Finally, I stood up. Marcus, Simone, I said quietly, thank you for dinner. It's been enlightening. I turned to Veronica one last time. Next time you try to buy someone off, I said gently, make sure they're not the one who could buy you twice over. And with that, I walked away, past the chandeliers, past the stunned waiter, past every pair of eyes that followed me out the door. When I reached the street, the cool night air hit my face. I smiled. For the first time that evening, I felt completely seen. Not by them, but by myself. Because pretending to be poor didn't reveal their wealth. It revealed their poverty, the kind that no money can ever fix. Open. I smiled faintly. Yes, $40,000 a month. No inheritance. No husband's shadow. No investors. Just me. The only sound in the room was the slow ticking of the clock on the wall. I never told Marcus, I continued softly, because I wanted him to grow up humble, to learn that dignity doesn't come from money, but from character. But tonight, I exhaled steady and sharp. Tonight you made the mistake of measuring me with your wallet. Veronica's lips trembled. I didn't mean... Oh, but you did, I said, leaning forward, my voice cutting through the air like glass. You wanted to buy my silence, my distance, my absence. But I don't sell my love, Veronica. I don't sell my motherhood. Franklin shifted uncomfortably, but I didn't even glance at him. My eyes were locked on hers. You say Marcus deserves stability. You're right. But stability isn't built on money. It's built on respect. And you, despite all your investments, have never learned that. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping the marble floor, a sound that made everyone flinch. When I walked into this house tonight, I thought I was the poor one, I said, grabbing my purse. But now I see, poverty isn't about bank accounts. It's about spirit. And tonight I've never seen people poorer than this. I turned to Marcus, my tone softening. Son, you don't owe me anything. Just remember where you came from, and never let anyone make you ashamed of it. Marcus's eyes were glassy, his voice breaking. Mom, I smiled, gentle but unyielding. No tears. I'm fine. I've been fine for a long time. Then I looked back at Veronica one last time. Keep your 700, Veronica. You'll need it more than I do, to buy back the dignity you just lost. And with that, I walked out, leaving behind a silence heavier than all the money in their world. Her mouth hung open. I repeated it slowly, letting each word cut through the silence. 40,000 every month. For almost 20 years, the air froze. You could hear the clink of a spoon somewhere in the distance. Marcus dropped his fork. Simone's eyes widened. Franklin's brows knitted in disbelief. And Veronica, she just sat there, mouth slightly open, trying to understand what she'd just heard. Yes, I said calmly. 40,000 a month. That's almost $10 million over my career. And that's not even counting the investments, the bonuses, the company shares. Veronica blinked fast, her face pale. No, I don't understand. You earn 40,000 a month? That's right, I replied, my voice steady. I'm the regional director of operations for a multinational corporation. I oversee 5 countries. I manage budgets worth hundreds of millions. I make decisions that affect more than 10,000 employees. I sign contracts your lawyers would need hours to read. And I do it every single day. Marcus's voice was trembling. Mom, why didn't you ever tell me? I looked at him soft but firm. Because you didn't need to know, son. Because I wanted you to grow up valuing effort, not money. I wanted you to become a man, not an heir. Money corrupts, Marcus, and I wasn't going to let it corrupt you. Simone's whisper broke the silence. But then, why do you live in that small apartment? Why do you wear simple clothes? Why don't you drive a luxury car? I smiled gently. Because I don't need to impress anyone. Because true wealth doesn't scream, it whispers. Because I learned that the more you have, the less you need to prove it. I turned my gaze to Veronica. That's why I came dressed like this tonight. That's why I acted like a naive, broke woman. I wanted to see how you'd treat me if you thought I had nothing. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. And I saw it clearly, Veronica. I saw exactly who you are. Her face flushed crimson, shame, rage, disbelief all tangled together. This is absurd, she snapped. If you really earned that much, we'd know. Marcus would know. Why would he believe you were poor? Because I let him, I said. Because I never talked about my job. Because I live simply. Because I invest my money. I don't parade it around in restaurants or jewelry. I don't measure worth by receipts. Franklin cleared his throat, trying to regain control. Even so, this doesn't change the fact that you were rude. That you misinterpreted our intentions. I turned to him slowly. Oh, really? I misinterpreted when your wife called me a burden? I misinterpreted when she offered to pay me $700 a month to disappear from my son's life? I misinterpreted every condescending comment about my clothes, my work, my home. Franklin's mouth opened, but no words came out. I placed my napkin on the table, stood up, and met every eye around me. Let me tell you something that clearly no one has ever told you. My voice was low, but it carried. Money doesn't buy class. It doesn't buy empathy. It doesn't buy dignity. You may have money, but you don't have an ounce of what truly matters. Veronica stood trembling with anger. And you do? You who lied, who deceived us, who made us look like fools? I didn't even raise my tone. I didn't make you look like fools, Veronica. You did that all by yourselves. I just gave you the opportunity to show who you really are, and you did. Brilliantly. Simone's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know. Mother-in-law, I swear I didn't. I know, I said softly. You didn't, but your parents did. And they enjoyed humiliating me. Until they realized the woman they mocked has more money, more control, and more peace than they ever will. Veronica trembled. You have no right. I have every right, I cut her off. Because I'm your son-in-law's mother. Because I deserve respect, not for my salary, not for my title, but because I'm a human being. Something you seem to forget the entire night. Marcus stood. Mom, please. Let's just go. Not yet, son, I said quietly. I'm not finished. I looked at Veronica one last time. You offered me $700 a month to disappear. Let me offer you something instead. I leaned forward. I'll give you $1 million right now, if you can prove that you've ever treated someone kindly who didn't have money. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Exactly, I whispered. You can't, because to you, people are worth what they have in the bank. And that's the difference between you and me. I built wealth. You spend it. I earned respect. You buy it. I reached for my old canvas tote, the same one she'd sneered at when I arrived. I slung it over my shoulder, calm as ever. Her posture was no longer that of the proud, untouchable woman I'd met just 2 hours ago. She looked smaller now, human almost. I slowly reached into my bag and pulled out my black platinum corporate card. The metal gleamed under the restaurant lights. I placed it on the table in front of Veronica. A soft clink, small, but it echoed like thunder. This, I said quietly, is my corporate card. Unlimited limit. I slid it toward her. Pay for the entire dinner and leave a generous tip. Consider it a gift from a broke and naive mother. Veronica stared at it as if it were a venomous snake. Black, polished, my name engraved in silver letters. Alara Sterling, Regional Director. Her hand trembled slightly as she picked it up. She turned it over, studying it, then looked up at me. Her eyes no longer held that sharp, superior gleam. Now, there was something else, something raw. Fear. I don't need your money, she said, her voice breaking. I know, I replied calmly, but I didn't need your pity either. And yet you poured it all over me tonight. So please, take this as a gesture of courtesy. Or maybe good manners. Something you clearly didn't learn, despite all those trips through Europe. Franklin's hand slammed softly against the table. Enough, this is getting out of control. You are disrespecting us. I turned to him, my tone as cold as glass. Respect? Interesting word. Tell me, where was your respect when your wife asked if my salary was enough to live on? Where was it when she called me a burden? Where was it when she offered to pay me $700 to vanish from my son's life? Franklin's jaw tightened. Veronica just wanted to help. I smiled faintly. No, Veronica wanted control. She wanted to make sure the poor mother wouldn't ruin her daughter's perfect image. She wanted to remove the weak link from the chain. I leaned forward. But the problem is, she picked the wrong link. Simone's head was bowed, her hands trembling in her lap. Simone, I said softly. She looked up, eyes red, tears streaking her makeup. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. My parents. Don't finish that sentence, I interrupted gently. Because you did know. Maybe not about my money, but you knew who they are. You've seen how they treat people they consider beneath them. And you stayed silent, Simone sobbed. I wanted to say something, but they're my parents. I know, I said softly. And Marcus is my son. And still, I let him choose freely. His life, his wife. His path. Because that's what love is. Freedom. Not control. Not guilt. Not money disguised as affection. Marcus stepped closer, voice trembling. Mom, forgive me. Please forgive me for never asking, for assuming, for thinking you were... His words failed. I took his hands. You don't need to apologize, son. I did what I did for a reason. I wanted you to grow up independent, to value people, not price tags. To learn that love isn't about how much you can provide, but how much you care. Marcus's voice cracked. But I thought I had to protect you. That you needed me. I smiled sadly. You weren't wrong. You were being kind. That's how you learn empathy. By thinking beyond yourself. That's something no amount of money can ever buy. He pulled me into a hug, tight, wordless, honest. Veronica stood frozen, her face hard but her eyes glassy with humiliation. This doesn't change anything, she hissed. You lied. You deceived us. You came here with hidden intentions. You acted in bad faith. I nodded. That's true, I acted. I pretended to be something I'm not. I paused, letting my words hit her. Exactly like you do every single day, Franklin frowned. What's that supposed to mean? It means, I said evenly, that you hide behind your money, behind your jewelry, your luxury trips, your imported wines. You hide behind everything you can buy, because inside there's nothing left. No curiosity, no kindness, no soul. Just a bank account. Veronica let out a short, bitter laugh. Coming from a woman who lied all night, that's hypocrisy. Perhaps, I said softly. But my lie exposed your truth. And now you can't hide behind your wealth anymore. Because now you know, I saw you. I heard every disguised insult, every smug advice, every quiet humiliation. And I will never forget them. The waiter approached cautiously. Excuse me, would you like anything else? Franklin's voice came sharp. Just the check. The waiter nodded and quickly disappeared. Veronica sank back into her chair, shoulders slumped, eyes down. Her posture no longer regal, no longer superior. She looked like what she had tried so hard not to be, small, and as I watched her, I realized something. For the first time all evening, she wasn't performing. She wasn't pretending. She was just human. I picked up my old canvas tote, the one they'd mocked when I arrived, slung it over my shoulder, and with calm steps I said quietly, You wanted to teach me my place tonight, Veronica, but instead, I taught you yours. Then I turned to Marcus and Simone. Come, children, let's go home. And as we walked away, leaving them behind in stunned silence, I knew I didn't just win an argument. I reclaimed my dignity. As if it were a sacred relic. He nodded respectfully and disappeared again toward the payment counter. The silence that filled the table now was different, no longer awkward, but heavy, electric, charged with realization. You could almost hear the sound of illusions cracking. Veronica's hands were still folded in her lap, her knuckles white. Her lipstick had faded. Her confidence, the kind that came from thinking she owned the room, was gone. I took a slow sip of water. You see, Veronica, I said quietly, the difference between us was never money. It was class. And you can't buy that, no matter how many luxury trips you take or handbags you collect. She didn't respond. Her eyes were locked on the tablecloth as if she could erase everything that just happened by staring hard enough. Franklin returned a few minutes later, red-faced, muttering under his breath. They said there's some kind of security flag on both accounts. They'll fix it in an hour. That's fine, I said evenly. I already paid, he froze. You didn't have to do that, he muttered stiffly. I know, I replied. But I wanted to. Consider it. Poetic symmetry. Simone looked up, her eyes still glistening. Mom, please stop. This is too much. I turned to her gently. No, sweetheart. This is enough. This is what too much looks like when people decide your worth before you even open your mouth. The waiter returned, handing back my card with both hands, a faint bow. Everything is settled, Ms. Sterling. Thank you for dining with us. Veronica blinked at the name. Ms. Sterling. It sounded foreign to her ears, like hearing a title she never earned but always assumed belonged to her kind. When the waiter left, Franklin spoke again. Why? Why did you come here pretending to be someone else? Because, I said, standing up slowly, I wanted you to show me who you really are when you think someone has nothing to offer you. No one answered. Even the background chatter of the restaurant seemed to hush for a moment, as if the universe itself was listening. I looked at Marcus. He stood too, his jaw set, his expression clear. Let's go, Mom. We started walking toward the exit. Behind me, I heard Veronica's voice, faint, trembling. "Ara, wait!" I turned around. She looked different now, smaller somehow. Not because she had lost her money, but because she had lost her illusion of control. "Why?" she asked again, tears in her voice. "Why go through all this trouble? You could have just told us who you were," I smiled softly, "and you would have treated me with respect?" She looked down, silent. "That's what I thought." I placed a hand on her shoulder, not out of pity, but out of finality. "You judged me for being poor. Tonight you learned that poverty isn't always about money. Sometimes it's about spirit." Then I walked out, leaving her sitting there, surrounded by luxury, drowning in silence. As Marcus held the door for me, I heard her whisper one last thing, not to me, but to herself. I misjudged her. And for the first time that night, Veronica was right. The waiter returned as if handling a sacred relic. "Thank you, Miss Sterling," he said softly. "Everything has been taken care of. Would you like the receipt?" "It's not necessary," I replied calmly. He nodded and walked away, leaving behind a silence thick enough to slice through. Veronica's eyes stayed fixed on the empty space where the black card had rested, as though she were staring at the ghost of her own pride. I rose slowly, slipped my worn wallet and canvas tote over my shoulder, and turned to face her one last time. "The dinner was lovely," I said. "Thank you for recommending this place, and for showing me exactly who you are. You've saved me years of wasted energy and countless future disappointments." Veronica's head snapped up. Her eyes were red, not from tears, but from rage barely contained beneath her polished exterior. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You can't just humiliate us and walk away like nothing happened. Simone is our daughter. Marcus is your son. We'll still be family. You'll still have to see us." "You're right," I smiled, voice calm as glass. "I will see you at birthdays, Christmases, family dinners. But now I'll see you differently. I'll never again wonder what you think of me. Because now I know, and you'll know that I know. You'll live with that every time you see me. Every fake smile, every forced greeting will remind you of tonight." At that exact moment, Franklin returned. His phone hung limp in his hand, and the color had drained from his face. "There's a problem with the accounts," he said, voice low. "A temporary block. The bank will fix it tomorrow." He looked around the table, avoiding my eyes. "Did they already pay?" "Yes," Veronica muttered, eyes down. "She paid," Franklin said quietly, disbelief breaking through his pride. "Thank you." "You're welcome," I replied smoothly. "That's what family's for, right? Helping out when someone's short a small allowance, say $700. Or, in this case, $800, the price of this dinner." Franklin shut his eyes. Veronica's hands balled into trembling fists. Marcus stepped forward. "Mom, let's go, please, it's enough." I nodded. "You're right. It is." Then I turned to Simone, her eyes glassy, her face streaked with quiet tears. "Simone," I said softly. She looked up. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You're not to blame for your parents," I said. "No one chooses where they come from. But you do choose how you act, how you treat others, and how you'll raise your children someday." Simone nodded, tears spilling again. "Don't apologize," I added gently. Learn. Learn that money doesn't define worth. That humility isn't weakness. That respect costs nothing. And if you ever have children, teach them to see hearts, not bank balances." Simone broke down completely. Marcus held her close. Veronica turned her face away. Franklin kept staring at his phone, the safest place to hide from shame. I started walking toward the exit, then paused and turned. "Oh, Veronica," I said. She looked up, wary. "You said you speak 4 languages, right?" Veronica frowned. "What does that have to do with anything?" "Just curious," I smiled. "In which one did you learn kindness?" Because clearly, it wasn't in any of them. Her mouth opened, no sound. "Exactly," I said. "You can speak 100 languages and still never say a single thing worth hearing." And I left. Marcus followed me out. The cool night air met us like truth itself, sharp, cleansing. I drew a deep breath. For the first time in years, I felt light. Not physically, but inside, as if the weight of silence and pretending had finally fallen away. "Mom," Marcus said quietly, taking my arm. "Are you okay?" "Perfectly fine," I replied. "Better than I've been in years." "What about you?" He exhaled. "I don't know. I'm processing. I can't believe you never told me about your job. The money, everything you've built." I stopped and met his eyes. "Does it bother you?" He shook his head instantly. "No, I'm proud. Incredibly proud. But I also feel blind." "You're not blind," I said gently. "You saw what I allowed you to see. I wanted you to grow up independent, to fight, to earn, to value things, to know life without the safety net of my wealth. That's the only way you learn what really matters." Marcus nodded slowly, the weight of realization settling in his voice. "I understand now. I finally get why you never complained, why you never asked for help, why you always seemed so calm. Because you never needed anything." I smiled faintly. "Oh, I needed many things, son. Just not the kind money could buy. I needed to see you grow up, to see you become a good man, to watch you make the right choices." He hesitated, his voice barely above a whisper. "Even marrying Simone?" "Yes," I said softly. "Even marrying Simone. She's not her parents. She can learn. She can change. But that depends on her. And on you, on how you both decide to build your life, and which values you choose to live by." Marcus fell quiet, lost in thought. A taxi pulled up beside us. I had ordered it before we left the restaurant. I opened the door, but he stopped me. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why did you do it? Why pretend to be poor? Why not just tell them the truth from the beginning?" I closed the taxi door and turned to face him. "Because I needed to be sure, son. I needed to confirm if my suspicions were right, if Simone's family was exactly what I thought they were." And sadly, they were. His eyes dropped to the pavement. "I'm sorry." "You don't need to apologize for them," I told him. "But you do need to decide what kind of husband you want to be. What kind of father you want to become one day." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said quietly, "you've just seen two completely different ways of living with money and power. Your in-laws use it to control, to humiliate, to feel above others. I use it for freedom, to help quietly, to live peacefully. You have to choose which path you'll take." Marcus nodded slowly. "I understand." I opened the taxi door again and stepped inside. The window rolled down and Marcus leaned closer. "Mom, one last question, yes? Will you ever forgive Veronica and Franklin?" I paused, thinking. "Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting," I said. "And it doesn't mean allowing them to do it again. Maybe someday if I see real change, if they start seeing people as people, not price tags, then maybe. Until then, I'll stay polite, distant, and cautious." He hesitated again. "And me? Do you forgive me?" "For not asking questions, for assuming, for letting that dinner happen." I looked at him tenderly. "Son, there's nothing to forgive. You did what you thought was right. You wanted your family to meet. That's beautiful. What happened after wasn't your fault. It was theirs. And maybe a little mine too, because I decided to play their game." He smiled faintly. "But you won." "I did," I nodded. "But I don't feel victorious. I feel tired and sad, because I confirmed something I wish I hadn't, that some people will never change, that some families are broken no matter how much money they have, that there are emptinesses no bank account can ever fill." The taxi driver cleared his throat gently. "Ma'am, should we go?" "Yes," I said. "Just a moment." I looked at Marcus one last time. "Go to Simone. Talk to her. Listen. Support her. But be honest. Tell her what you felt tonight. Tell her what you expect, from her and from her family. Because if you don't draw the line now, this will repeat itself again. And again." "I will," he said firmly. "I love you, Mom, and I mean it more now than ever. Because now, I know who you really are. And you're incredible." I smiled, warmth flooding my chest. "I love you too, son. Always have, always will. No matter how much money I have, or don't." Because love has no price. And that's something Veronica and Franklin will never understand. Marcus stepped back from the taxi. I gave the driver a small nod. Let's go. The car pulled away. Through the window, I watched Marcus walking back toward the restaurant, his shoulders heavy, his mind racing. He was going back to face Simone, to confront her parents, to have the kind of conversations that make a man grow. And in that moment, I felt something stronger than relief. Pride. Because he was learning. He was becoming better than the example he'd just witnessed. The taxi slid through the glowing streets, the city lights reflecting off the glass. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and replayed every word, every glance, every moment of tension from that night, the night that tested everything I believed in. As the taxi hummed through the quiet night, I couldn't stop wondering, had I done the right thing? Had I been too harsh, too cruel, too vengeful? But then the memories came rushing back. Every disguised insult, every condescending remark, every glance soaked in disdain. And I knew the answer, no. I hadn't been cruel. I had simply been honest. The city lights flickered past the window as the car glided through nearly empty streets. Towering buildings blurred into streaks of gold and silver. I reached into my old canvas tote and pulled out my phone. A simple one. No gold edges, no glitter, no pretension. Just a phone. 3 unread messages blinked on the screen. One from my assistant reminding me about Monday's meeting. Another from a colleague congratulating me on a contract we'd just closed. And the third, from an unknown number. I opened it. Mother-in-law, please forgive me. I didn't know my parents would act that way. I'm ashamed. I need to talk to you, please. Simone. I stared at the message for a long moment. Part of me wanted to reply, to tell her it was okay, that I understood. But I didn't. No, not yet. She needed time. She needed to feel it, not just regret it, because words spoken in guilt are easy. Real change takes time, reflection, and action. I set the phone aside. The driver glanced at me through the rearview mirror. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said softly. "Everything okay?" I looked up. "Yes, everything's fine." "Why?" He smiled faintly. "You got in very quietly." Most people who come out of that restaurant are laughing, taking selfies, talking about how great the food was. "You looked like someone who just walked out of a war zone." I couldn't help a small smile. Something like that. "Was it that obvious?" He chuckled. "I've been driving a cab for 20 years. I've seen it all. Drunk people, fights, breakups, family arguments. You've got the look of someone who finally said something they've been holding in for a very long time." "You're perceptive," I said. He shrugged. "It's part of the job. Helps pass the hours. Want to talk about it?" "You don't have to. But sometimes it's easier telling your story to a stranger." No judgment, no consequences. I thought about his offer. It was strangely comforting. But I shook my head. "Thank you. But I think I've said enough for one night." He nodded slowly. "Fair enough. But let me tell you something." He glanced at me again, eyes kind but steady. "Whatever happened back there, you did the right thing. I can tell. Because you're calm. You're not crying, not angry. You're just quiet. That means you said your truth. And the truth always brings peace even when it hurts." His words caught me off guard. He was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and rough working hands. A simple man, like the one I had pretended to be. "You believe in truth?" I asked quietly. He smiled. "I believe in honesty. Truth is tricky. It changes depending on who's telling it. But honesty doesn't. Honesty is saying what you really feel, without masks, without filters, even when it hurts. Even when it makes people uncomfortable. Even when it costs you," I nodded slowly. "You're right," he laughed softly. "My wife used to tell me I was too direct. Said I had no filter, that I'd hurt people without meaning to. Maybe she was right. But she also said she never doubted me, because she knew that whatever came out of my mouth was real. Not rehearsed, not fake. Just real," I smiled. "She sounds like a good woman." "She was," he said, eyes softening. "She passed away 5 years ago." "I'm sorry," I said sincerely. He shook his head. Don't be. We had 40 years together. 40 years of honesty, of fights, of laughter, of tears, of making up. And not once did I go to sleep wondering what she really thought. Because she always told me, and I did the same. That's a gift. I nodded, my voice barely a whisper. You're right. It is a gift. The taxi slowed to a red light, the glow washing over his weathered face. Can I ask you something personal? He said, go ahead. He hesitated for a beat, then asked, Are you rich? The question hit me harder than I expected, not because of the words, but because of the simplicity in how he asked it. Why do you ask? I said. He smiled in the mirror. Because I just picked you up from a place where dinner costs $1,000 per person. But you're dressed like someone who shops at a thrift store. You've got an old tote, worn shoes. But the way you speak, the way you move, it's like someone who runs the place. And the way you paid, and that realization felt like breathing for the first time in years. It wasn't victory. It wasn't revenge. It was release. Quiet, steady, absolute. I leaned back against the sofa, the steam from the tea rising softly in front of me, curling into the air like a small ghost of warmth in the silence. The clock ticked gently on the wall, the same clock I'd bought 2 decades ago when Marcus was still a child, when life was simpler, messier, poorer, and somehow fuller. Everything around me was ordinary. The scuffed coffee table, the half-wilted plant on the windowsill, the bookshelf stacked with novels whose spines had long since faded. And yet tonight it all felt sacred, because every piece of this small life had been earned. Nothing borrowed. Nothing begged for. My phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from Marcus. Mom, we talked. Simone's still crying. She says she wants to see you tomorrow. I think she's finally starting to understand. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering above the keyboard. For a moment I considered replying. Then I decided against it. Some lessons need to breathe on their own before they sink in. Instead, I set the phone face down and took another sip of tea. Outside, the city kept moving. Cars, laughter, sirens, lives. But inside my small apartment, time felt still. I could finally hear my own thoughts without anyone talking over them. I walked over to the window and looked out. 5th floor? The street below glowed dimly under the flickering yellow lamps. Somewhere a couple was arguing. Somewhere a child was laughing. Life continued. Raw, flawed, beautiful. I smiled faintly. For years I had believed that power came from what you could buy, from what doors money opened. But tonight proved something different. Real power comes from knowing who you are, and not needing anyone's approval to exist as that person. I turned back toward the room. My canvas tote lay on the chair, my old wallet half open. Inside it was a single photo. Marcus at 10 years old, his face messy with birthday cake, missing a front tooth, grinning at the camera like the world was nothing but possibility. I picked it up, brushed my thumb across it, and felt tears sting my eyes. Not from sadness, but from gratitude. Because despite everything, despite all the ugliness of the night, life had still given me what mattered most. A son who loved me, a heart that hadn't hardened, and the courage to stand in my truth. The kettle clicked as it cooled. I turned off the kitchen light and made my way to bed. The sheets were cold, but familiar, like an embrace that didn't need words. As I lay there, my mind replayed the dinner, the faces, the silence that had followed my final words to Veronica. And strangely, I didn't feel anger. Just clarity. People like her, people like Franklin, they lived in cages made of their own arrogance. Mine had been built of silence. Tonight, both cages broke. I closed my eyes and exhaled deeply. Tomorrow, life would go on. Meetings, work, emails, plans. But it would all be different now, because I was different now, free. And for the first time in years, I didn't dream of escape or success or proving anyone wrong. I just slept, peacefully, quietly, completely, in a home that didn't need to be impressive, in a life that finally felt like mine. Marcus laughed softly on the other end of the line. but it was the kind of laugh that hides exhaustion. "Yeah," he said. "But you know what, Mom? For the first time, I didn't care. Their money, their approval, it doesn't matter anymore. I just want peace. Our peace." My throat tightened, but my voice stayed steady. "That's all I ever wanted for you, son." There was silence again. Not the heavy kind, but the kind that feels like a shared breath. A quiet understanding between two souls who had walked through fire and come out whole. After a moment, he spoke again, softer this time. "Simone wants to see you today. She said she needs to apologize in person. Is that okay?" I looked around my apartment, the soft morning light spilling through the curtains, the stillness that felt almost sacred. Then I smiled. "Yes," I said. "Tell her to come by this afternoon. But tell her she doesn't owe me an apology. What she owes herself is honesty, and it sounds like she's already found it." Marcus exhaled with relief. "Thank you, Mom, for everything. I don't think you realize how much you've changed us." "Oh, I didn't change anyone," I said quietly. "The truth did. I just stopped pretending not to see it," he chuckled. "You always know what to say." "That's because I've already lived through all the things you're just starting to understand." We both laughed softly, the first real laughter in a long time. It felt light, healing. After we said goodbye, I put down the phone and sat for a while, just listening to the hum of the city, the whistle of a kettle boiling somewhere nearby, the distant bark of a dog. There was peace in that ordinariness. I thought of Veronica and Franklin, two people still clinging to control, still mistaking power for love. I didn't hate them. I didn't even pity them. I simply accepted that their world, built on pretense and hierarchy, would one day collapse under its own weight. Mine already had, and I had rebuilt it. Quietly, piece by piece, with truth as my foundation. I took another sip of coffee, now lukewarm, and smiled faintly. Sometimes, the most revolutionary thing you can do is simply refuse to play a game that was never designed for you to win. I stood, stretched, and walked to the small balcony. The air was crisp, the kind that wakes you up from the inside. Below, a street vendor shouted prices for fresh bread, and children chased each other past him, laughing. The world kept moving, messy, unpredictable, alive, I whispered to myself. Let it. Because for once, I didn't need to control anything. I didn't need revenge or recognition or validation. Just this. This stillness, this morning, this truth. And as the first ray of sunlight broke through the clouds and touched my face, I closed my eyes and smiled. The storm had passed, and I was still standing, emotional blackmail, the last resort of people who've already lost the argument. Exactly, Marcus said, his tone firm now. But it didn't work this time. Simone stood her ground. So did I. They stormed out of the restaurant without a word, without even looking back. And honestly, Mom, I felt relief, like something heavy had finally fallen off my shoulders. That's because it did, I told him softly. You dropped the weight of their expectations, their control. Now you're free to build your life on your own terms, not theirs. There was a small pause. I could hear him exhale through the phone. Thank you, Mom, he said, his voice catching with emotion. For what you did last night. I know it wasn't easy. I know how uncomfortable that dinner must have been. But we needed it. I needed it. To see who they truly were. And Simone? She needed to see that life doesn't have to be lived through performance or pretense. That there's another way. An honest way. You're welcome, son, I said quietly. I only did what my heart told me was right. There's something else, Marcus continued. Simone wants to come see you. She wants to apologize in person. She said, she doesn't want to come as my wife trying to impress you. She wants to come as a woman who wants to learn from you. What do you think? I thought for a moment, staring out at the sunlight creeping across my windowsill. Tell her she can come, I said finally. But not today. Give her time to sit with what happened, to let it settle. Real apologies come slowly. The rushed ones fade fast. I'll tell her, Marcus promised. Mom, one more thing. How are you? After everything? I smiled faintly. I'm fine, son. Better than fine. I'm at peace, because I said everything I needed to say, and I don't regret a single word. There was a pause, then his voice softened. I'm glad to hear that. I love you. I love you too, I said. Now go rest. I'll see you soon. When I hung up, I finished my coffee and stood up, feeling light, almost weightless. For the first time in a long time, I wanted to go outside without purpose, without rush. Just walk. I put on my old jeans, a faded top, and worn-out sneakers. Grabbed my keys, locked the door, and stepped into the sunlight. The streets were alive. Children running, couples holding hands, vendors calling out breakfast specials, the scent of warm bread drifting through the air. Life in its purest form, unfiltered, unpretentious. I wandered toward the park and found an empty bench beneath an old tree. I sat and just watched. So many faces. So many lives. Most of them didn't look wealthy. Their clothes were modest, their hands worn from work. But their smiles? Real, warm, unbothered. And I thought of Veronica and Franklin, with all their money, their mansions, their endless vacations. Were they happy? Or were they just endlessly buying distractions, filling silence with glitter, mistaking possession for peace? A soft voice interrupted my thoughts. Good morning, said an older woman as she sat beside me. Good morning, I replied. Beautiful day, isn't it? She said with a kind smile. Very beautiful, I nodded. She pulled out a small bag of bread and began feeding the pigeons. I come here every Sunday, she said. It's my moment of peace before the week starts running again. I understand, I said. I needed some peace too. Rough week? She asked gently. I smiled faintly. Something like that? More like a rough night, she nodded knowingly. Sometimes one night is enough to change everything. You're right, I murmured. She glanced at me with eyes that had clearly seen a lot. Can I give you some advice? Please, I said, smiling. She pointed toward the pigeons. Look at them. Some are big, some small. Some have shiny feathers, others look scruffy. But they all eat the same bread, share the same space. None of them thinks they're better than the others. That's a beautiful metaphor, I said softly. It's not a metaphor, she replied. It's the truth. Humans are the only creatures foolish enough to build false hierarchies, to measure worth with things that never really mattered. Money, clothes, names? Pigeons don't do that. They just live. They just are. Maybe we should learn from them. I smiled, a real full smile. You're absolutely right. I should bring a few people here for your classes. She laughed, her wrinkles deepening with joy. Oh, child. At my age, I don't teach anymore. I just observe, and sometimes I share what I see. But most people don't listen. They're too busy running, buying, competing, forgetting that, in the end, we all end up in the same place. I nodded quietly, feeling her words settle somewhere deep inside me. The pigeons fluttered, the sunlight warmed my skin, and for the first time in years, I felt completely, beautifully, free. With or without money, jewels or mansions, in the end we all turn into dust. How philosophical, I murmured. How realistic, she corrected gently. I've lived 82 years. I've seen it all. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. The most miserable people I ever met were always the ones who had the most. Because it was never enough. They always wanted more. Always comparing. Always competing. And in the end, they died without ever having lived. Without ever truly loved. Without ever being. Her words sank deep into me, not as new wisdom, but as something I had always known yet never dared to say aloud. Thank you, I whispered. She laughed, her wrinkles deepening with joy. Oh, child. At my age, I don't teach anymore. I just observe. And sometimes I share what I see, but most people don't listen. They're too busy running, buying, competing, forgetting that, in the end, we all end up in the same place. I nodded quietly, feeling her words settle somewhere deep inside me. The pigeons fluttered, the sunlight warmed my skin, and for the first time in years, I felt completely, beautifully free. With or without money, jewels or mansions, in the end we all turn into dust. How philosophical, I murmured. How realistic, she corrected gently. I've lived 82 years. I've seen it all. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. The most miserable people I ever met were always the ones who had the most. Because it was never enough. They always wanted more. Always comparing. Always competing. And in the end, they died without ever having lived. Without ever truly loved. Without ever being. Her words sank deep into me. Not as new wisdom, but as something I had always known yet never dared to say aloud. Thank you, I whispered. She smiled, patting my hand with her thin, weathered fingers. You're welcome, child. And remember, it doesn't matter how much you have or don't have. What matters is how you treat people. That's what lasts. That's what's remembered. That's the only inheritance that truly matters. She rose slowly, tucked away her empty bag, and waved. Have a beautiful Sunday. You too, I replied softly. I watched her walk away. Small, frail, her shoes worn thin, yet she carried more dignity, more wisdom than all the Veronicas and Franklins in the world combined, and I felt something rare. Gratitude. For that moment, that reminder, that truth. I sat on the bench a while longer, letting the quiet settle over me. No guilt, no second thoughts. Just clarity. I didn't regret a single thing. Every word, every choice, necessary, liberating, honest. And honesty, even when it burns, is always the right path. 3 days passed before Simone finally came to my door. 3 long days of silence, reflection, and processing. For both of us, I imagine. When the bell rang that Wednesday afternoon, I somehow already knew it was her. I opened the door, and there she stood. No makeup, no jewelry. Her hair pulled back into a simple ponytail. Jeans, a plain top, flats. She looked real. Not the polished, cautious woman from the restaurant, but someone stripped of all armor. Mother-in-law, she said softly. May I come in? Of course, I said, stepping aside. She entered quietly, eyes scanning my apartment. The worn couch, the small dining table, the faded curtains, everything simple, lived in. No luxury, no show. I motioned toward the sofa, and she sat. I sat across from her, silent, patient, letting her gather her thoughts. I don't know where to start, she said finally. Start wherever it feels right, I replied. She inhaled deeply, steadying her trembling hands. I came to apologize. But not just with words. I came to explain, to help you understand why my parents are the way they are, and why I stayed quiet for so long. I nodded gently, saying nothing. My parents grew up poor, she began, voice fragile, in a small village overseas. No electricity, no running water. They worked the fields as kids. They watched their own parents die young, because there was no medicine, no money, no hope. They were hungry most days. They suffered. And they swore they'd never be poor again. That they'd do whatever it took to escape that life. I listened quietly. That explains a lot. They worked themselves to the bone, she continued. They saved every penny. They immigrated here with nothing. Franklin built his company from scratch, literally from nothing. And when the money started coming in, they never forgot what it felt like to have none. That's why they obsess over it. That's why they measure everything through it. Because to them, money means safety, control. It means never going back to the dark. It's understandable, I said softly. Trauma does strange things to people, Simone nodded. But that doesn't excuse what they did to you. I know it doesn't, and I want you to know. I saw it all. Every comment, every look, every insult. I saw it, and I said nothing, because silence was how I survived with them. I've been doing that my whole life. Staying quiet, agreeing, obeying, because they taught me that to disagree was betrayal. To speak up was being ungrateful. I leaned forward slightly. And now, She swallowed, eyes glistening. Now I see how wrong that was. That love isn't control. Family isn't blind obedience. I can love them and still refuse to become them. Marcus helped me see it. You helped me see it. That night at the restaurant, when you revealed yourself, when you told them everything, it was as if a blindfold had finally been ripped from my eyes. Simone wiped her tears, her voice trembling but clear. I always knew something was wrong. I always felt the way they measured people was twisted. But I kept convincing myself that it was me, that I was too sensitive, that maybe I didn't understand the world. But you showed me something different. That there's another way to live. A way where money doesn't define worth, where humility is power, and where authenticity is the real kind of wealth. I took a quiet sip of water. Simone, I didn't come that night to change you. I came to protect myself, to understand who I was really dealing with. I know, she said softly, and I thank you for that. Because your brutal honesty saved me. It saved me from becoming my mother, from passing on that same poison to my future children, teaching them that people are valued by what they own. I don't want that. I don't want to be that. I nodded. And your parents? How are they after everything? Simone sighed, a sound heavy enough to fill the room. Furious, hurt, humiliated. Veronica hasn't spoken to me in 3 days. And Franklin, he sent me a message saying I'd disappointed him, that I chose strangers over my own blood. That one day I'd regret it. She paused. But you know what's strange? I don't feel bad. I feel free. That's good, I said gently. It means you finally made the right decision, Simone nodded. Marcus and I set boundaries. We told them they can still be a part of our lives, but only if they respect us. Respect our choices. Stop trying to control us with money or guilt. And if they can't, then they'll have to live with the distance. How did they take that? I asked. Badly, she admitted. Veronica called us ungrateful. Franklin threatened to disinherit me, as if that was supposed to break us. As if the only thing that ever mattered was their money. That's when I realized they truly believe their value exists in their wallet. I sighed. That's very sad, very, Simone agreed. Because they have so much, and yet they enjoy nothing. They just collect, compete, compare. But they never stop to ask, are we happy? Do we have peace? Real love? Real connection? No. They just count their properties and call it victory. But inside, she paused, her voice breaking. Inside, they're empty. Silence filled the space. Then Simone looked at me with new eyes. Mother-in-law, I want to ask you something. Go on, I said. I want to learn from you. I want you to teach me how to live with dignity. How to be rich without needing to prove it. How to stay calm in chaos. How to be strong without turning cruel. Because that night, I saw something in you I never saw in my parents. I saw class. I saw real power. A woman who didn't have to shout to be heard. I smiled gently. Simone, I can't teach you that. It's something you learn by living, by falling, rising, failing again. I can only share what I've lived. The road isn't easy. You'll face criticism, judgment. People won't understand your peace. But if you stay true to your values, you'll find a kind of peace that money can never buy. I want that, Simone said quietly. Not just for Marcus, but for me. Because I'm tired of chasing approval, of living to impress, of fearing I'll never be enough. Then start, I told her. Not all at once, slowly. Start questioning your habits, your choices. Before every purchase or decision, ask yourself, is this for me or for others? Does this bring me peace or just appearance? She nodded, absorbing every word. And my parents? She asked finally. Do you think they'll ever change? I looked at her honestly. I don't know. Change begins with realizing there's a problem. And they don't think they have one. They think the world is wrong, that everyone else is ungrateful. Until they see that, they won't change. But you can. You can break the cycle. I will, she promised. With Marcus, and maybe with your guidance. I shook my head. You don't need my guidance. You already have your compass, that quiet voice inside you. The one you silenced for years to please them. Listen to it now. trust it. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Thank you, she whispered. For your honesty, your patience, for not giving up on me. There's nothing to thank me for, I said softly. Just promise me one thing. When you have children, teach them the value of people, not their price. Teach them empathy, humility, and kindness. Things that cost nothing, but mean everything. I promise, Simone said, her voice steady now. With all my heart, we hugged. A real hug, no masks, no pretending. Just two women, finally seeing each other for who they really were. She left an hour later, lighter, freer, with hope shining in her eyes. I closed the door behind her and looked around my small apartment. I smiled, because this was enough. Honest space, authentic life. Real love, my phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. Mom, Simone told me about her visit. Thank you for welcoming her, for listening, for giving her a chance. I love you more than words. I smiled and typed back simply, I love you too, son. Always. I put my phone down and watched the sunset through my window, orange melting into pink. And right then, I understood something profound. Real wealth isn't what you own. It's what you feel. It's peace in your chest, honesty in your heart, love that doesn't need proof. Veronica and Franklin had millions, but I had this tranquility, authenticity, my son's love. And that made me infinitely richer. I never pretended to be poor again. I didn't need to. I had spoken my truth, set my boundaries, protected my peace. And for the first time in my life, I didn't have to act like anyone else. I was simply myself. A woman, a mother, a survivor, rich in every way that truly mattered. And that was everything. Did this story touch your heart? Tell me which city you're watching from in the comments below. If you'd like to support more stories like this, you can send a super thanks. It really helps keep these stories alive. On your screen now, you'll find 2 new life stories I think you'll love. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you in the next story with love and respect.